Hello and welcome. I'm Aussie Expat coming to you from Las Vegas. And today is the day. This is the day. We are here. It is accomplished. It is done. Bitcoin $100,000. This is just the beginning. Is just the beginning. This is still very, very, very early in Bitcoin's journey. For some, it may not feel like that. It's been a long slog for many. Look, anyone out there holding today, you've done it. You've done it. You've weathered, whether you've bought at the top at 99,000, commend you for having the balls to see it at that price. A lot of us saw it at lower prices, but also had to go through all the swings and the misses, the ups and the downs. If you're holding Bitcoin through six figures, you have done something that a lot of people would not have, expected you to be able to do. You know what I mean? A lot of people would say, take it out, buy something for yourself. Maybe you did a little bit or something like that. I hope it wasn't too much. Again, ultimately, we are very, very early in this game. We're very, very early. You still have people out there. Oh, AI things don't. We still have people out there who are still fighting like the most basic questions, like can it be hacked, or how do you buy something with it? Just very, very basic stuff. The real question isn't like, is Bitcoin early? It's absolutely early. Can you go to your McDonald's and buy anything with Bitcoin? The answer is not mine. I know there are some around the world, and like I think in Switzerland there was one. But the reality is apps like Cash App and Zelle and stuff like that. Those are more in people's parlance. Now some of them are adding Bitcoin features. So it is a world that is slowly changing, but we are far from it yet. I mean, if I had to put a pin on crypto right now, as in like what's the most exciting development right now in terms of actual adoption, I think it's USDC on Base. Just from the perspective of like just price is just easier to settle as USDC, and I'm not going to deny that. So it's very, and being able to actually have real wallets on USDC and do transactions that are truly peer to peer and uncensorable and so forth, and settle them as USDC and not incur tax implications and weird volatility stuff from a business perspective. If you're talking about opening up to businesses, and then additionally, development like about a month ago, adding interest payments to USDC wallets on chain, meaning there's effectively no real reason to use a bank anymore. If all you want is US dollars, USDC and Base, you can do instantaneous payments. You can get your interest on it. You get the highest savings rate on USDC and Base, and go forward. But it's still based ultimately on a shitcoin. It's still based on US dollar. Eventually, Bitcoin has no top because fiat has no bottom. And quickly, suddenly and then quickly, good currencies replace bad. Everyone's will always be thinking about when that'll happen and so forth. But it'll come. It'll happen like a thief in the night. One thing I think is really interesting is like Michael Schiff has put out a tweet about like how the government's supporting Bitcoin right now, and that it's an inflated asset because the government's like propping it up. It's like, well, hey, Schiff, you've never been right about anything, but every government in the world has gold reserves. So going into Bitcoin reserves is sort of okay. I mean, it's better than USD. I mean, we saw the Biden administration weaponize the US dollar, as in made it basically censorable that you couldn't get it out of your central banks and so forth. You couldn't trade with its SWIFT network, blah, blah, blah. So you're seeing an interesting situation where governments are starting to support Bitcoin. I'm not exactly sure why, but I think it just sort of like makes sense from an individual government's perspective, and that is ultimately Bitcoin threatens all forms of government. If you control the currency, you control everything. The real question is like, can you incentivize people to stay on your currency and stay controlled? And it's dancing with a partner that is ultimately it's like Black Widow or something. Like the government is dancing with Bitcoin right now, and eventually the situation's going to turn. Bitcoin will be the currency, and it will also take over. Take away power from the government, take it away from them. Their ability to print money is all that they need to control everything that happens in from the smallest to the biggest things in your life, whether it's war or whether or not you can afford groceries. That's all controlled by the money supply. Bitcoin takes that away from them, but they're in a sort of a weird situation where there's no real way to stop it. There's no real support from any of the populace to stop it. There's no one's really concerned. When it comes to crypto, either people are sort of like tacitly curious or, mildly against it, or at least maybe they're heavily against it in their heads, but, in terms of their actions, there's nothing that they can really do to be destructive to crypto. No one will be able to stop it. It is inevitable. And in that situation, the governments individually see their enemies as being hurt by it as much as they are, and collectively more than they would be. So if China is like, okay, if Bitcoin comes in and undermines everyone else's currency, maybe that's a good thing, and maybe they think that they can win this game for longer or what have you. So ultimately, I think that they're at a sort of a turning point where they either get on board or they sort of suffer their fate. So it's going to be interesting. Like Bitcoin's path to domination as the world's currency, the world's preeminent store of wealth, store of value, transfer of wealth, transfer of value, the currency. It's going to take a long time. There's going to be ups and downs, not just in price. Not every aspect of adoption will happen smoothly. It's going to take some time. But until then, you just need to take a look at global GDP and then try and figure out how much that is, how much is required in currency to be able to trade that, to facilitate the engine of the world, and replace it with Bitcoin. And there's also going to be a portion of Bitcoin that is just held by people just trying to preserve their wealth. So how much of the liquid supply is really translates to that maximum GDP. So the sort of target numbers start being like a minimum 13 million per Bitcoin. What time frame? Who knows? Will I even be alive by then? Whether it's old age or by because of the ensuing wars that our governments will no doubt involve us in. Right now, even as the lame duck president tries to escalate the war by killing Russians in Russian territory without any mandate from the people. He's trying to be a hero, I guess. It hopefully one day, and hopefully one day I get to see it, Bitcoin will dominate, and the power of governments to F with the people will disintegrate. They'll be that simple. There won't be a way for them to do it without us voluntarily saying, it's like, oh, you do something good. Okay, maybe I'll throw you some shekels, throw you some Satoshi, and maybe that's how I want my relationship with the government to be. how would that be any different to just any corporate company? I don't know. I don't think there would be any difference. Maybe there is some vestiges of government in the future that, I don't know, voluntarily get paid somehow, some way, without, people with guns coming to your door, or the threat of people with guns coming to your door. So yeah, hopefully one day we'll get there, and the price will have to get there first. It has to be valuable enough for the world to trade it, and I mean with everything like currency and so forth. And it will get there. It'll get there. Now, will it be as valuable? So somebody was like, it was like the value of all assets. I'm not sure if that really makes sense. I don't think it makes sense. I think it makes sense that it replaces all the currencies, and it has to facilitate, the global GDP changing hands, transacting, so on and so forth. But I don't think that it has to like literally supplant all assets. Although I do understand Michael Saylor's point that it should replace a lot of assets that people have no real interest in holding, apart from their potential wealth preserving capability. So, for example, buying the family's 30th, 31st, 32nd, 33rd single family home just to rent it out, not because they want to be great landlords and are really passionate about, delivering shelter for families, but because there's nowhere else to park their money. Eventually, that hopefully that is supplanted, that the need for people to buy real world items as a store of wealth, declines. And you can just enjoy the items, enjoy the goods and services that are provided to you. I mean, it sounds wild that you could buy a house and not worry about its price, but the reality is you don't buy, milk and eggs and hope that the value of the milk and eggs goes up. No, you need those to live, and similarly for shelter. And it's sad when these things get securitized and financialized. For the most part, I'm pretty open to narratives around securitization and financialization of assets. And in many cases, it does open up a lot of opportunities for things that could occur that wouldn't normally occur. But we'll see. It's the Wild West. It doesn't even matter what I think, because it'll happen. As if whatever happens will happen. If Bitcoin remains a better store of wealth and outperform the S&P 500, outperform all other assets, why would you hold any other assets? I don't know. Now, there's a lot of risk between now and then, for sure. A lot of volatility, and that's one thing I've been learning in the last month, 2 months, and that is, even with like lots and lots of experience, there's still a lot of people out there who aren't even exposed to stocks, and just, what it feels like to own something that is priced 9 to 5 effectively, Monday to Friday, and just holding onto something that, will go up 10%, go down 20%, stuff like that. And then in a crypto world, it's like, oh my gosh, the volatility is completely insane. But Warren Buffett, actually, despite him being like a huge anti-crypto guy, even he makes points that are worth, noting, and that is, volatility isn't the same as risk. Like in all of the math around like stocks and all that kind of stuff, options, they normally say volatility is the risk, but that's honestly hogwash. Bitcoin has never changed. Okay, was Bitcoin at $1,000 fundamentally different to 10,000 to 50 to 70 to 100? Bitcoin has never changed. There are other assets that have performed very well. Let's say Nvidia over the last 2 years. Well, the prospects for Nvidia keep changing. Like, it's like 2 years ago, it was riding on the crypto thing. Now it's the AI thing. And there are things that will change in the environment that fundamentally make Nvidia's business potentially impossible. Now, right now, they look unstoppable. But you have to understand that there's companies that are paying literally billions of dollars to get their hands on their GPUs. They could just siphon off a little bit of that so that they can create their own chips. And I saw AWS today announce here in Las Vegas that Trainium 2, they've got new chips. And so NVIDIA is fundamentally, while their performance has been good, the volatility has been pretty high, not crazy like Bitcoin, but the reality is that their fate can turn on a dime, right? That volatility reflects potentially like real outcomes at play. Bitcoin, on the other hand, has never changed. There's no CEO who can screw it all up. There's nothing that anyone can do to stop it. Do you want to create a say an altcoin that will take over? Go ahead. Go ahead. It's not going to survive without Bitcoin surviving. That's really it. So volatility isn't the same thing as risk. Bitcoin is the least risky asset there is. It's simple as that. Now, you will face ups and downs, but the fundamental risk of Bitcoin, there is none. It's uncensorable. It's unstoppable. Its position is inevitable. We'll get there. On that note, I hope you're holding, and until next time, see you around.